Continuing education knows that at the end of the day, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we really listen to their needs, and we can offer them flexible options both within continuing education and across the campus.
We don't take a cookie-cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the 78th Annual Conference on World Affairs. My name is Nicole Schmoll, and I will be serving as today's moderator. I'm a Navy veteran, a senior at CU Denver, and a cadet here at CU Boulder Air Force ROTC Detachment 105. For recording purposes, today's date is Wednesday, April 15th, 2016. Panel time, 9 a.m. Panel title, CU Boulder 150th, From Cadet Corps to Space Force, CU Boulder's Military Legacy. Now, before we get started, I would like to read the University of Colorado Boulder's land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Thank you. Once again, welcome to CWA and today's discussion. We ask that all attendees remain respectful throughout the discussion and refrain from interruptions. Signs, banners, noisemakers, and other audible disruptions are not permitted and will result in those responsible being asked to leave the room. Please silence your cell phones. Time will be allotted for questions for our in-person audience. We will take your questions via handwritten note cards. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and one of our producers in the back will give you a note card and a pencil. Please print legibly, then raise your hand when you have a completed card, and a producer will collect it and bring it to me. This morning's panel, From Cadet Corps to Space Force, CU Boulder's Military Legacy, highlights over a century of military service and leadership that began with a small cadet corps established by students in 1883. Today, CU Boulder is the only Colorado school and one of only 30 in the nation to host all 3 ROTC programs, commissioning more than 100 new officers into 5 military branches each year. This military legacy is not just historical, it's ongoing and getting stronger every year. CU Boulder continues to grow and develop leaders who carry on a legacy of service and excellence in all 3 programs. Air Force ROTC is the 5th largest detachment in the nation, with nearly 300 cadets pursuing a commission into the Air and Space Forces. Naval ROTC commissions both Marines and sailors and produces more Navy SEAL officers than any other school outside of the Naval Academy. Army ROTC is over 100 years old and hosts cadets from 12 local partner universities. Together, these programs reflect not just a legacy of service, but a continued commitment to developing leaders who will shape the future of our military. As we celebrate CU's military legacy, we recognize our fallen alumni who once walked these halls and paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. We have an incredible panel of CU Boulder ROTC alumni today, sharing a wide range of military experiences. First, we have right next to me, Lieutenant General Nahom, a retired fighter pilot, having served 36 years on active duty in the Air Force. Lieutenant General Nahom is a CU Boulder graduate of the class of 1988. Next, Captain Elliott is a retired Navy SEAL and a 1985 CU Boulder graduate. He currently serves as the Director of Veteran and Military Affairs on the Student Life Leadership Team. Next up, Major Vansel is a member of the Colorado Army National Guard, currently serving as an Army ROTC instructor here in Boulder. Major Vansel graduated from CU Boulder in 2009. And finally, Captain Cervantes is an active duty Air Force experimental test pilot serving at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Captain Cervantes is a 2017 CU Boulder graduate. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here with us today to share your experiences and perspectives. Let's get into our first question. The first question is, what drove you to pursue a career in the military and specifically through ROTC here at CU Boulder? Sir, if you would like to start, that would be great, yeah.
Looking around for some help. You know, we all have different experiences. I did not come to CU to serve in ROTC. I kind of found ROTC when I got here. And it came to, and it was Air Force because I had a love for flying. I got introduced to flying early on. And then I ended up joining when I got here. So probably a different experience, but than most who have or probably may have been called to serve. I will say though, after signing up though, you catch the people and just fell in love with it right off the bat and didn't want to do anything else after that. So that was in my freshman year, but it was just really by accident for me.
Yes, I was in a class in Old Main, and there was a ROTC guy, a Navy ROTC guy in his uniform. He looked normal. I'm like, and became friends with him, and he walked me over to the ROTC unit, and yeah, they had a plan for me, so I signed up.
So I come from a military family. My father was a non-commissioned officer in the Army. My grandfathers were in the Air Force and Navy, and even my great-grandparents served in the military. So military service is kind of like family business for us. But my goals, I wanted to be a pilot, and that led me to pursuing aerospace and an ROTC scholarship here at Boulder.
I actually had a similar experience as you, General Nahum. I didn't think of a career in the military until I got here to CU. It was actually not even my freshman year. It was my junior year of college. So what attracted me about CU was its engineering program. So I came out to do aero engineering, and it was local. I'm a Colorado native. And then I moved into aerospace engineering. And during one of my classes, I saw a bunch of cadets down on the front row in their button-up shirts and their shiny belts, and I became friends with them. And I liked what they were saying, and I liked what they stood for. And I learned more about the Air Force and ROTC. And then my junior year, the summer of my sophomore year, I went and signed up. I just rolled into the offices, and I asked them, how can I join? And so at the time, the shortest amount of years you could go through the program was 3. So I needed to do something to basically do an extra year at the university. So I extended an extra year so I could finish up ROTC. But yeah, like you said, General Nahum, once I joined, I loved it. I'm still friends with those people whom I went through college with, and it was the best decision I ever made.
And what is something that you learned during your time as a cadet and at CU Boulder that really stuck with you throughout your entire military career, sir, and so far for you, that you think you wouldn't have learned otherwise?
For me, it's probably a little bit what we were talking about earlier, just out front here before the panel started. CU is just an amazing place, and people come from all over, and they all different walks of life. And I always got asked, how was it walking around in uniform in Boulder? And I was like, it's one of these kind of to each his own towns. Everyone, and my brother came here on a running scholarship. My sister came here because she likes the outdoors and never left Colorado. So even in one family, you just found people from all walks of life, all going different places, and you still became really good friends. And it's just one of these, Boulder's is one of these special places like that. And I always took that with me in my career, and I always had this magnet, always wanted to get back here for that, for the different people and the different experiences you find here in Boulder.
Before I joined ROTC, I was king of the earth. I could bench press 350 pounds. I could run a 6-minute mile. And then I joined ROTC. And I spent a summer with the Marine Corps gunnery sergeant, and I came back a changed person. I was on time, I was disciplined, and it really changed my life.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what General Nahum said, is that here at Boulder, you run into so many different people, different walks of life, some who are in ROTC, some who aren't, so many different ideas and experiences that as a leader, when you go into the military, especially new soldiers or when you get to a new unit, you're kind of going to end up in that same similar situation where everybody's got a different perspective, different background. And being able to identify with those people in your unit to help develop those individuals, but also the organization is really important.
I think ROTC prepared me for the vast amount of backgrounds and different perspectives that I was going to work with in the Air Force. If I hadn't joined ROTC, I'd be in the engineering building 24/7 with people who think like me and are super technical, and so I wouldn't have learned as much as I did about just life in the world if I didn't have classmates from different backgrounds and walks of life and even different majors who think differently. And so after you go into the Air Force, it's always like that. Everybody comes from a different place in the country or even the world. One of my old coworkers, I think, was born on Ramstein in Germany, and they have different perspectives. And so it kind of prepared me for that and prepared me to be able to listen and just have empathy and think about where they're coming from and what they're saying when you're working with somebody. And I think it was really helpful.
So a few of you touched on the very diverse campus that CU Boulder has. Now, how do you think that your time at CU Boulder shaped your leadership style?
Let's start at the end first? Yes, sir. We'll start in the middle next time.
Yeah, sounds good. I've had to work in a lot of environments that are technical. All of my assignments have been working in either test or with other engineers or program managers, things like that. And so I think CU gave me a lot of credibility because the Aero program is fairly highly ranked, and so you people learn went to CU, and you did ROTC there, and so automatically you get a little bit of a boost in credibility. So that's, to me, understanding that leadership is at its core is really just influence. It really helped in that sense.
Yeah, it kind of ties into what my last answer was, but the having that humility when you're with a large group of people, that to know that you might not be the most intelligent person in the room on a particular subject, or you might not be it might not be something you have expertise in, or somebody else might know more about it than you do. Really shaped being able to influence others into providing the best ideas forward. So that kind of, I think being at CU really helped me develop my humility as a leader. It's important to have hubris some of the time, part of motivating others, but being able to understand when other people might have better ideas or develop solutions that you might not have thought of is really important.
In my senior year at Boulder, I was the midshipman battalion XO. I had over 200 midshipmen, and I kind of liked being in charge. And so I pursued more of those types of jobs when I got on active duty.
One thing that I pulled out of CU is it sounds kind of weird saying the discipline that you need to graduate and become an officer from the school. If you're at a smaller school or even academy, again, nothing against smaller schools, the academies, somebody might be telling you what to do, where to go, and if you're having trouble in a class, they may be helping you out. And CU, if you don't go to class, no one's going to tell you not. You really have to get up, and there's a lot of distractions in this town, fun distractions, and you had to have a certain amount of discipline to make sure you're successful in class and successful as a cadet to make it through. And I think I carried that on. That you need to take care of yourself in this town.
Thank you. It sounds like I heard a lot of themes of discipline and humility. Now, what kind of leadership traits do you think are uniquely developed in a university-based ROTC program as opposed to our other commissioning sources such as USAFA and OTS?
Got it. So the main ones ROTC is different from the academies where in the academy you're in that environment 24/7. You're being trained and developed. Officer candidate school is usually more of your prior service enlisted who have chosen to take that next step. So they've got a place where they've come from and where they're headed to. In ROTC, you've kind of got both. You've got a bunch of people who have never met before, who are heading the same way, but you've got the diverse background. So the main traits really are your time management piece. As General Nahom was saying, you have to take care of yourself. Well, in ROTC, you're only being trained while you're in class and while you're doing ROTC events. The rest of the time is on you to develop that disciplined time management to be able to be an effective officer in the future. I think that's probably the main difference with ROTC.
Yeah, I think ROTC is really good for diversity because service academies, you go to boarding school, locked up, then you go to West Point, locked up, and then you get out on society, right? But the ROTC kids, I was in a fraternity, I'm a uniform 1 day a week, so I think you bring a lot of that diversity to service.
Yeah, and it makes you look at what you're doing differently too. I remember when I was a senior here, and the class sizes get smaller, and it was a Thursday, so I was in uniform, and I remember the professor, there asking me, what's the military think of that? And so you kind of had to, be prepared for that answer in a room full of, I think there was 30 other classmates in that room. I was an economics major here, and there was 30 other people, and you kind of had to give a little bit of a military perspective to a group of people who probably don't have that perspective, and that you wouldn't see that at an OTS, and you certainly wouldn't see that maybe at an academy.
Yeah, I think as an ROTC student, you're a college student first, and it comes with the distractions and the fun. And ROTC is an extracurricular. At the academy, you are, from day one, your first summer, from my understanding, is like you go to a boot camp before you even go to your freshman year, right? And so you're in the military. So a quick anecdote, I've met a lot of folks from the academy, and for us at CU, going to a football game was something you wanted to do. For at the academy, whether it's -10 or whether it's 100 degrees, they're out there in their full service dress uniform in the stands at every football game. At least when they were freshmen and sophomores, I think. They were forced to be there. Rather than I'm guessing what they wanted to do was study or train or whatever. But so that's just one small difference in the two ways between ROTC and the academy. Which goes back to just a totally different experience, totally different perspectives that you gain here at ROTC as a college student first.
Now, CU Boulder is the only Colorado campus to host ROTC programs for all 5 military branches. Do you feel that your experience being on a campus like Boulder's that has that diversity of branches prepared you for joint opportunities once you entered active duty?
It does, and I think any time you get a chance to work with the other services, it does broaden, and you get a chance to make relationships with other midshipmen or other Army cadets that you carry on the rest of your career. And I can't tell you how many times from time at CU or other joint schools and things as I was in that I would make a friend with a classmate, and then a year or two later that would be the person I needed to call. And hey, I need somebody in the Navy, need to answer this question, and you go back to a classmate or from another school you did. So it does offer you an incredible opportunity to carry on friendships, and those are as you stay in the if you stay in the military longer and you start commanding, those are some of the people you end up leaning on when you just because you're in an Air Force organization, and I need to know what the Army thinks of something, and you call a cadet that you met here at CU that you just stayed in touch with over the years, and it's just a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't have much joint time in college, but definitely when I got to the SEAL teams, and ultimately when I was assigned to Joint Special Operations Command after 9/11, General McChrystal was the commanding general, Admiral Craven was the deputy. We didn't have a national security strategy to counter terrorism globally, and I made a lot of PowerPoint. The Army's much better at that than Navy guys, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think the collaboration that occurs when you have multiple ROTC programs on the same campus, because the ROTC programs do joint events together, which gives the cadets an opportunity to really work together and develop that ability to need to break past those. How do I put it? Our different ways of thinking to accomplish the mission, and then those being able to do that sets you up in a way that when you enter that joint environment, to be able to understand one another a little bit better than somebody who maybe didn't have exposure to the Air Force or Navy or the Army if they were in one of the other services that you get when you're in ROTC here at CU.
Yeah, I agree. Just the different, it did prepare me for joint environment. And the ROTC cultures among the different services are truly reflective, I think, of what they're like on active duty. We did every year we had the athletic competition amongst all the different ROTC detachments, and the Army or the Marines always won, and truly that's how it is on active duty too. They're much more fit than we are. The other thing is my senior year, there was a Marine gunnery sergeant who came to an ROTC class and told us all about the Marines, and that whole thing started because all of us in the Air Force detachment were truly terrified of this gunnery sergeant. He was this super professional, super serious guy. With his uniform looked like it was painted on him, and he'd walk down the hallways, and we would just get out of his way. And I think our captain at the time realized that, and she put this thing together where she invited him to class, and he just talked to us about the Marines, and opened up on a personal level, and we asked Q&A, and that was one of the instances where it gave me a sense of like whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, now Space Force. They're all just people with the same problems, and if you build a bond with them early on, you can call them up anytime and work together on things.
Major Vansel just touched on this a little bit, but some of you have made a professional return to CU, notably Major Vansel being an instructor in ROTC, and Captain Elliott being on the veteran military affairs team here. What do you believe has changed the most in how we develop military leaders at CU from when you were here as a cadet and now?
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing now, so I'll pass the mic on that one.
So I'll start by saying I think like the technological developments that we've had since I was a cadet. So when I was a cadet, not everybody even had a cell phone in their pocket. Like we still did things. At formation is when information got passed out, and whatever the plan was the plan that was executed. Now the information environment changes so rapidly that we have to train that into the ROTC program. So in the Army program, we've transitioned from whatever systems they were using to Microsoft Teams, just to get them used to the collaborative environment that we use in the Army, because the Army uses commercial off-the-shelf technology all the time, and Microsoft Teams being one of those. We don't want them to go into their first unit not knowing how that system operates. So that's one of the things that I've seen change since then. As far as the leadership and the fundamentals, those have always been the same.
You say the cell phone in the pocket. I went to school and there wasn't even a cell phone, so.
Roger, sir.
Yeah, and if you want to do a paper, you had to go to the Northern Library, get a card catalog, pull the card, go find the book. And you get there, the book's not there, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Can't relate.
All right. How do you believe that CU Boulder prepares cadets not just to lead in the military, but also in broader civic roles, especially for those of you who have already retired?
I think it comes down to what we were talking about earlier too, just the diversity of this campus, and you meet people who come from all over the country. When I was a student here, I remember one of the things they were talking about was there was representatives from every state, and I'm sure it's probably still that way, where the people from all over the country, all over the world, that come to see you, and I think it prepares you to think differently, because you're not all together in a military institution. You're from all over the place, and it forces you to think differently, and forces you to take different angles on really, really difficult decisions you make throughout your military career. You find yourself with a much broader perspective, I think, and it really the foundation for me was my time here at Boulder, and many of the people I met and came across.
It definitely teaches you discipline, work ethic, integrity, and treating everybody with dignity and respect.
So in just a few weeks, CU Boulder is going to have around 10,000 new grads, and CU Boulder ROTC programs are going to be commissioning almost 100 new second lieutenants and ensigns. What piece of advice would you give to those who are starting their journey as leaders or are looking to improve their leadership skills?
I'll jump on this one a little bit. So if I was to give them a piece of advice, it would be don't chase your dreams, pursue your goals. Dreams are kind of aloof. They float around in places where you can't really reach them. But goals are where you are grounded. And there's a path or multiple paths to get to them. And you just have to navigate the forks in the road and plan ahead, and you can reach those goals.
I think this advice would be to any officer or NCO about to join the service, or anybody about to graduate and going to go and try and be a leader anywhere. For me, it's just take your time at it. I think, like I said, leadership, at its core, I think leadership is just influence, and you're not going to have that on day one. It's something that's built over time. So, show up wherever you are, take your time, do a good job, get a bunch of experience, have fun, go be distracted once in a while, have a good time. And over time, if you do a good job, you'll start to build experience and credibility, and people will see that. And then that'll turn into trust and influence. And then in no time, you're going to be leading large teams and being really effective.
Yeah, I'd say obviously the first thing is that relationships matter. The people you meet here are people you should stay in touch with, because that'll serve you well. But the leadership starts with you. The example you set. Some of the best leaders that I've had throughout my career were some of the best people, and they're people that I wanted to be like. I wanted to emulate. So take a look at yourself, and make sure that you are that person that you want people to follow. 'Cause it starts with you, and it starts right here as a cadet.
Yeah, always take care of others above yourself, and you can. Some people fake that, and people know, but work those extra hours to get them the awards, write their evaluations to get them promoted, because they all have families, and that's the key. And the ones that cause trouble, obviously, that's a different discussion, but generally, that's been pretty successful for me.
Thank you. What is one key moment of your career that you believe has shaped you the most?
I think it was probably it happens really fast when you come. When you get in the military, things can happen really fast. For me, I graduated in '88, and a little over 2 years after graduation, I was still a lieutenant, and I found myself deployed in Saudi Arabia for Desert Storm, and at that, I still had classmates that were in Det 105. I was a senior, and the cadets who were freshmen and sophomores were still in school, and so it happens fast. I think that probably it's not. It's pretty serious business when joining the military, and you can find yourself in a situation pretty quickly, and you're going to be reaching back on what you learned, not only in your training leading up to that point in the military, but certainly what you learned here as a cadet.
Yeah, so I was in command over in Germany. I got a call from the SEAL Admiral. He goes, "You're taking command of all basic advanced training in 2 weeks. And I said, hey, sir, I'm overseas, He goes, that's it, the discussion's over, and he hung up. And then, it takes about 3 months to get your house all good, so I took command of all the training from the Navy Lodge in Coronado. And what had happened, the previous CO, they had a thing called Giftgate, where these student classes had like 200 students. They'd all give, $25 for their student fees. 80% of those students would go away. And they'd have these money markets out in town, and then students were buying these lavish gifts for instructors, sniper scopes, tickets to Disneyland, salon treatments for their all this stuff. And instructors were taking it. They call it Giftgate. And so my first week there, I fired 16 instructors. I fired the executive officer. Spent the next 2 years pretty much alone. But that is command. It's a lonely place to be. So that was probably my biggest challenge, because the making of a SEAL is a very emotional thing, and everyone's got their own idea how to do that. And you have instructor pleasure and legitimate training value, and keeping it in this box over here is a daily challenge.
So in 2018 to 2019, I transitioned from aviation to space operations for the Colorado National Guard. The interesting story about that is that the commander of the National Guard Space Battalion was Colonel Paolilli, who, sorry, not Colonel Paolilli. Anyways, the commander was my father's platoon leader when my father enlisted in the Army. But what I didn't know then is that decision to transfer to space would change the course of my career and open up opportunities to be aide-de-camp in Bosnia, to deploy with the Field Artillery Brigade, and then later to take an Army Space Support Team downrange. And every once in a while there's an opportunity that you don't know where it's going to lead, but being able to say yes to the opportunity will open doors that you had no idea even existed.
Like General Nahum said, every assignment moves so quickly, and it just changes you as a person, I think. Nothing specific for me, just realizing that the Air Force moves you often about every 3 years to a new job, a new state, maybe a new country. And so you change a lot as a person. And so just hearing these stories from these guys, and me being the youngest panelist here, just makes me humbled to be sitting next to you guys. And I look forward to talking to you more and learning more about you. But you change so much from day one to even 3 years after for your next assignment.
All right. Now, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, and I heard some of your somewhat answers to this, but what drew you to serve, and what was it about ROTC here that made you realize that staying in the program was your path?
We kind of mentioned earlier that it was by accident for me. I think it's people sign up for the military for so many different reasons. Some it's to help pay for school, or maybe a parent. I think what's more interesting is why people stay in long. And for me, it was the people around. How do you? I did a 36-year career. How do you stay in 36 years? It's 3 years at a time. You're around the people you want to be around. You believe in what we're doing. You believe in our country. And you want to be around more and more of it, and I think that's to me it was really about the people, and wanting to stay with the people that were around me.
I'm definitely with the people. I love the guys and gals I worked with, and I think doing something bigger than yourself is really important. Running the veteran program here, about 400 students when I started, about 1,600 this semester, so about a 400% increase. A lot of folks enlist in the military to get the GI Bill. You do 36 months, you get basically full ride to college. But I think once you get in the military, it becomes about service for all of them.
Yeah, I grew up, like I said at the beginning, I grew up in a military family, so I don't think I ever thought about not serving in the military. But I would hope that everybody who does serve in the military at least has that little bit of a sliver of doing something that is greater than being just for themselves, but something greater for the good of our nation.
Yeah, I agree with all three. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Great. And if you had to do your whole career, your career so far all over again, what would you change and what would you absolutely have done the exact same?
I would have done it exactly the same way, all over again. I loved it.
So I would probably have taken the advice of the leaders ahead of me to take the advantage of the opportunities to invest that the military has to offer, like the thrift savings plan. I think I wouldn't change my career, but what I would do is take opportunity of the other things that we have available to us in the military to know that I'm in a better position later.
Yes, I joined the SEAL team so I didn't have to be on a ship. It's a horrible experience. And I got these orders to SEAL delivery vehicle team. They're 25-foot long wet combat submersibles with 2 dry deck shelters on the back of nuclear submarines. And I was on a submarine for the next 3 years all the time. One time, like 40 days underway with no sunshine. And I would have fought those orders harder if I'd have known you're going to send me to a submarine.
To me, it was probably about mentorship. I think when I was a young officer, and really throughout my career, I was always hesitant to seek out a mentor, somebody to talk to, and so I kind of did it. I think I did it more on my own, and probably to my detriment at times. And then as I became a senior officer, when people would reach out to me, and I'd come to my office or pick up a phone call for somebody who needs some mentorship, it turns out it's like the best hour of your day. And so I think what I would tell younger people getting in is reach out. Somebody's had this problem, somebody's had this choice of assignment, somebody's had this difficulty before, and they would love to talk to you about it. And I think that's probably one thing I would have changed. I would have reached out a lot more because I realized how it's not only good for me as a young officer, but as a senior officer, it was good for me as well to have people reach out.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move into some of our questions from the audience now. So to start off, this was touched on a little bit, but I want to know if there's more. So what were other inter-service events like when you were here, and how frequently did you have them, if you remember?
She looked at me when I said that.
There were, from memory, there were 2 events that we did, at least when I was a cadet here. The first one was the athletic competition amongst all the services, and we just went out to one of the fields, I forget what it's called, and it was run by cadets, which was a cool thing, professional development opportunity. So we put it together, and we invited all the different services, and it truly was just a camaraderie building competition amongst ourselves, the Air Force ROTC, but also amongst the other units. And the Army and the Marines truly did kick our butt every year. The other one was the award ceremony. We ended up doing a joint award ceremony, which was really special because each service could award scholarships and give out annual awards and things. But more than that, it was the background behind those awards. The Air Force had a lot of memorial scholarships. The Army and the other services had the same, and so it was really cool to see what what the other services valued and thought was special for them, and it turns out it's a lot of the same, very similar things as the Air Force.
I'll tell you as a cadre member that those 2 things still occur today. We just had the awards, the Tri-Service Awards ceremony a week ago, or just over a week ago. So it's really awesome to be able to recognize stellar cadets with either an award, and then some organizations provide scholarship as well. And then we also still do in the fall the tri-mill competition. I think Navy or Marine Corps won this past year, which is not abnormal. And then I think there's a little bit more collaboration in some other aspects, but for the most part, those were the same events we did when I was a cadet almost 20 years ago. So I don't know if they were the same for these gentlemen.
Yeah, the only time I ever saw Army and Air Force people used to pay the ROTC units. I think they still do to clean the stadium after football games. And I met a couple folks doing that.
Yeah, I know we're actually growing and expanding those joint operations as well. We've been holding physical training together. We've done a few already this semester, and UCCS, I believe, this week also just did one with Army down at the Springs. So a tradition that is just growing and growing. All right, and this was also somewhat kind of answered, but to those who, especially Major Vansel, how would you compare your time as a cadet as to being an instructor now?
Oh my gosh. So as a cadet, things happen, you're playing, as a cadet, our program is kind of cadet-led. The cadre mentor and monitor and provide guideposts for what training needs to be accomplished. The cadets actually formulate the plan and execute the plan as part of their development. What you don't realize is that all of the other things that take place in the background that the cadre do to make sure that things are going to go smooth, to make sure administrative requirements are met, to make sure that people are taken care of. As a cadet, you're oblivious to it all because you're just focused on the event and your grades and showing up on time in the right place and right uniform. But the cadre pull so much weight that you just don't even recognize. It baffles me how I got through ROTC as a cadet not recognizing that.
Awesome. I know firsthand just how stressful and how big of a responsibility it is to be a cadet here. Now, do you feel like you missed out on any normal, typical college experience because of the responsibilities that you had being a cadet?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that was kind of the beauty of coming to a place like CU. So you get to have the college experience and still prepare yourself to serve. So I don't think I didn't live because my brother and I lived together, and I was with all his friends. So I was with a bunch of athletes, and so I did a lot of things with them as well as cadets, and I really don't think we missed anything.
You had a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say there's no, you don't really miss out on anything. The university has tons of clubs and things like that you can do with other people who aren't necessarily in ROTC. There's concerts and other things that you can go to with your friends that you've made from living in the dorms. So you don't really miss out on a lot of stuff. I didn't do it, but I know that other cadets go into sororities or fraternities as well. So I don't think there's a lot of missed opportunity. There's scrupulous decision making on the part of cadets to make sure that they don't put themselves in positions where they jeopardize their future career. But as far as missing out on opportunities, I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. That even I was able to do some internships even throughout the semester. So it was all normal college things, and ROTC was truly an extracurricular. And I think even the cadre understood that we were students first. And so I never had to, but I suspect that if I had come up to them and said, hey, I need some extra time on this, or I need to miss class for primary academics or whatever, I suspect they would have been totally cool with it. And so, yeah, I was able to get a lot of opportunities from CU, which have followed me around and opened up doors in the Air Force and outside the Air Force. So nothing, I think, at CU or ROTC was detrimental in that aspect.
All right, what is one piece of advice that you were given as a cadet that stuck with you and that you carried with you throughout your career?
So I've got an answer for this. It was to always show up with with whatever the reg said in hand and a solution for the problem that you have. The number of times after commissioning that a soldier would come up and say, "Hey, sir, I've got a problem," or "I don't know how to do this," I'd ask them to bring the reg and the reference first before trying to solve the problem for themselves, or solve the problem for them, give them the opportunity to solve it themselves. And the regs pretty much have the answers in them. I made that mistake once in ROTC, and never again, and it allowed me to pass on that self-taught behavior to soldiers that I've had.
All right, if something comes to you, just shout it out later on. All right. All right, military service is serious business, but we all have had those absurd moments where we stopped and said, "Is this really happening right now?" And just had to laugh. What is your favorite moment like this during your time in service or as a cadet?
Yeah, so we were on the airfield in Libya waiting for a C-130 to come pick us up, and the guys were throwing rocks at the runway lights. I'm like, you guys realize that lights are out, the plane's not going to pick us up. But I found some humor in the fact that they decided to do that, and I promptly made them stop.
What branch were they, sir?
SEALs.
When I was in Afghanistan, our medevac unit was getting ready to redeploy home. The commander called everybody out and said, "Hey, I know we're redeploying and we're taking the helicopters with us, but just so everybody knows, we got a warno that we might be going to Iraq because the fight with ISIS was picking up and they needed medevac support out there." Got a lot of people up in arms because they were planning to go home. For me, it just kind of made me laugh because I have no control over what leadership decides to do. Fortunately, we did all end up going home, but it was just kind of one of those moments where you're like, okay, everybody's upset, but we have no control over it, so why are we upset right now? But that kind of stuff happens in the military quite a bit, I think.
I do have another story. I was the ground force commander for 2 non-combatant evacuations, one in Nigeria in 2003, another one in Chad 2008. In the 2003 one, we were there, had been there about 30 days, and we hadn't showered, and it was stable enough where an Army general was going to come in and visit us. So I had like $100 in my little bag, and I was going to go to the embassy compound and get some shaving cream, because I knew the first thing the Army guy would say was like, "Look at these ragtag guys, never shave, they can't wear a uniform." So I was walking to the thing to buy shaving cream, and a mortar flew over the thing and blew the place up, so we couldn't get shave. And what's the first thing the Army general said when he landed? "You guys look like a bunch of undisciplined, la la la." But I did make an effort to get shaving cream.
No, it's, I mean, there's a million stories. Probably some are not appropriate for this, but I do remember when I was coming out of War College, and I did my War College in Europe with the NATO Defense College in Rome, and they told me that afterwards I was going to go to NATO headquarters. And I was going to, this is to prepare you for a staff assignment at NATO headquarters. And so my wife and I were in Brussels, where NATO headquarters is, and we were on a trip, and she loved it, and we were talking about where we were going to live and all that. I got back to the hotel, and I saw an email that said, "Congratulations on your assignment to Yongsan, South Korea." And that was the longest walk of my life, from that computer to my wife to tell her, pack your bags, you're going to Korea. We're not staying in Brussels. And but that's that's the Air Force, and we love Seoul. It grew on us. And,
That's why they're called orders, not invitations.
yeah.
All right. What is your hope for the future of ROTC here at CU Boulder?
I hope it grows. I was just talking to Colonel Lang this morning, and it sounds like there's so much interest, especially in the towns across the state, that they've opened another small operating location down in Colorado Springs, and they've got a lot of interest. So I think ROTC, especially at CU, is a really good thing for each person as an individual and for the U.S. And so I hope it continues to grow, and I hope we continue to train really, really good leaders.
Yeah, I would say what I hope for it, I'm already seeing. I mean, it is grown. It's a strong. It feels like it's a stronger program than when I was here. And I want to say how many years ago, but it was like almost 1 million. And you still see the people I talk to. I've come back for some football games, and I met with cadets, and everyone still seems to have that attachment to Boulder. And you know, when I've been around the Air Force, you meet people that've been to school at CU. There's like this magnet attraction to the school, and I think I see that never going away, and I see the ROTC program, at least on the Air Force Space Force side, just continuing to grow, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I concur. The connection back to Boulder is pretty big. When I was stationed in San Diego, there was buff stickers all over the place. So there's a lot of alumni out there, not only military, but on the civilian side.
I hope the culture of the program stays the same. Like, I would hate for any one of them to no longer be here at the university. But I hope the cultures stay the same and stay as strong as they are now, and as compared to when I was a cadet. I mean, the lounge is almost still the same as it was. I think one of the couches up there is one that I fell asleep on after PT one day. You know, so, but keeping the culture strong, I think, is important for the future of the programs.
Definitely. And Captain Elliott, you touched on this a little bit, but I would love to know from all of you, how frequently do you run into fellow buffs on active duty?
All the time. I work with 2 now actively, and every assignment I've had, there's been buffs at all. Buffs and from crosstown schools too. I work with a lieutenant who graduated from mines a couple years ago, and not only at all my assignments, but you see them in the news like all the time. One of the astronauts that was just selected in September is a CU alumna. Speaking of military legacy, right? CU Boulder produces, not only in the military, but outside of the military, really, really special people, really high caliber people that go on to do great things. Jack Swigert, everybody's seen Apollo 13, the movie where they go around the moon, but they're not able to land because of the pressure leak. The guy whose line is, Houston, we've had a problem here, Jack Swigert, he's a CU Boulder alum, or was. So, they're all over the place, and they're doing really great things.
I was in CENTCOM just couple of years ago, and I ran into another major who had commissioned like 1 or 2 years before I did. So like on my way to lunch, he was walking back to wherever he worked, and I passed him and recognized him. So you run into each other all over the place, and the military makes that community even smaller.
Yeah, I was on an aircraft carrier in the middle of nowhere, and talking to some of the pilots, I go, is there Lieutenant Van Stee on board this aircraft carrier? And they're like, yeah, he is. And I went down to his stateroom, he was sleeping, and I knee dropped him to wake him up. So you see the folks throughout the services your whole time that you interacted with here at Boulder.
Yeah, people are different everywhere. But one of the interesting things is when you talk to you're talking to somebody, they go, where'd you go to school? I went to Boulder. Well, I went to the academy. We used to go up to Boulder on the weekends to have fun. I'm going, well, we didn't go to Colorado Springs, so we just stayed in Boulder. So that was always a conversation when academy grad found out you went to Boulder. Like, oh man, that must have been great. We're like, yeah, it really was. And,
yeah, some of my biggest leadership challenges were junior officers at the Naval Academy, because they've been, locked up. Now they're out, right? And the ROTC folks had already kind of been socialized to society prior to going out and about.
Yeah, I'd say if you want like structured regiment, like hard somebody who's really going to be a stickler for to the regulation, an academy person is that person. But if you want somebody who's like super strong interpersonal skill wise, your ROTC cadet's or lieutenant is probably going to be that person. That's probably the biggest way to tell the difference, other than whether or not they're wearing their academy ring on.
All right, and what does the balance look like between your work and your personal life, and how do values from your work affect your personal life?
The flying community is really special in that there's a saying, mission first, people always. And so that tends to be sometimes in tension. But the flying community is really special in that if there's unless you're deployed, and your family's back in the States, and there's a very clear disconnect and you're just flying all the time. But stateside, if you're scheduled for a flight or there's something high tempo going on, or there's some big mission, and you just speak up and you say, hey, I can't do this today because of family or personal issues or whatever. There's no questions asked. You get taken off the flight. If the flight needs to cancel, it does, and everyone goes about their day. So while it is high ops tempo, and you'll hear that a lot in the flying community, it's also really special because you get taken care of really, really well. So it's not a it is a challenge balancing life and family, personal life and work life, but they make it really easy.
Yeah, I'd say I'm in a unique position where, like right now, I'm an instructor at CU, but when I'm not, I'm a citizen soldier. My military career is 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, so I have a civilian life normally. But what you learn in the military or doing ROTC, especially those things we talked about, discipline, time management, and things like that, really transfer over into making sure that you can take care of multiple obligations at the same time. And then being, as Captain Cervantes said, if you're recognizing that as a leader you need to take care of people, you can recognize when those people need to be taken care of, and that includes their families as well.
That's, when you're young, it's, I'm not sure as a young fighter pilot I had any work-life balance. All we did was fly jets, and then we talked about jets, and then we talked about them more until my wife told me to stop talking about jets. As you get older, you definitely learn to have a little bit of balance. I would always tell people who work for me, I need you to take your leave. I need you to unplug. And the definition of a good set of military leave is somewhere during the week you forget what day it is, then you're truly on leave, and it's important. It's important to have that balance, especially for the families, because the families family's service is harder than the military person's service. And if you're not unplugging, then your family's not unplugging too. And so I found it more and more important as I got older in the military. I think we've been more engaged in the military too over the years. Back when I got in, it was still a Cold War. There were deployments everywhere all the time, like they are now. So as a leader, finding that work-life balance, living that work-life balance as a leader, and then helping the people that work for you have that work-life balance, I think it's got more and more important over the years.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it was like once I realized I had no control of my life became much easier. And my wife was always didn't know when I was coming or going, and she didn't really care. And that really, I remember I called her one time from Iraq, just hit 20 years of service. I called her and I said, hey, I don't think I can take this anymore. She goes, you're hanging out for the next promotion. And she hung up, right? So that's the kind of family you need, somebody that, if you've had Disneyland tickets 6 months from now, you may or may not be able to do that and kind of accept that as part of your life.
I think there's those are real situations, and they're very, when you're called to do something like that and leave your family, it's really tough. But there are vast more situations when, as an individual, to take care of yourself, and as a leader to take care of other people, it's really your responsibility to, like General Nahum said, to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, and that includes leave. One of the things I told one of my guys is, if you think that you taking leave is going to break the whole unit, that something's going to fall apart, then we're doing it all wrong anyway, right? So take your leave, and I don't want to. He has a work cell phone, so he'll be texting and doing things. And I'm like, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to see you. I'll see you next week.
That was that. A commander told me once, the graveyards are full of irreplaceable people. And I remember I don't know what I said when I was squadron commander, but I must have said it in a tone that was not acceptable to my wife and my daughters. I looked over there. All three of them are staring at me, and my daughter goes, "Daddy, we're not in your squadron. We don't have to listen to you." And I'm like, "You're right." Let me rephrase that.
All right, and I have one final question for the panel before we wrap up, which is, what is one thing that you want the audience to take away from this discussion today? Anything at all?
You'll never forget this place in CU and Boulder. You'll never forget your time here. And I don't live in Colorado, but I never, when Rebecca and the dad asked me to come back for an event like this or a graduation, I never say no, because you can't stand that coming back. It's just an amazing place, and take it with you. I remember 2 years. So 2 years after I graduated, that was 1990, and CU was in the national championship game. And I remember it was like 3 in the morning was the game, and I was sitting in my tent in Saudi Arabia. We were playing Notre Dame, and I was with a Notre Dame alum. And I'll never forget that. The two of us, the rest of the squadron was sleeping because we were flying the next day. We're like, we're not missing this game, and we won. And it was our only national championship. And you just never forget. You never forget Boulder, never forget this place.
Yeah, I think the connection back here, wherever you are, and I've got another Iraq story. I was there with General McChrystal. It was a Sunday. I was doing the talking points for CENTCOM, and they had a thing called VBRIC on our computers, and it was a Armed Forces Radio and Television had a CU game going. So I was doing my work and kind of watching the football game, and the general came in. He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing the talking points." He goes, "You're watching college football? We're at war." They didn't watch college football, World War II. I'm like, yeah, World War II, they didn't have armed forces, they didn't have computers, and I'm doing the work, and we're going to be at war terrorism for as long as you and I are alive, so I'm going to watch this football game. And he says, yeah, okay, and he left.
Yeah, I'd say the Boulder, for me, while it's not where I currently live, it always feels kind of like home. Coming back and seeing the ROTC department, even before instructing now, if I was in town, I'd try to pop in and see what was going on. We just had a former cadet the other day pop in and say hi and see if he could help us out. He graduated a year behind me. But yeah, it draws you in, I think part of that is just the pride in coming from CU, and then as an ROTC cadet coming from one of the programs that's here on campus.
Yeah, same thing. I think CU is a really special place because we were talking about it earlier. Boulder is one of the more liberal and progressive cities in the country, and ROTC gives people of those perspectives and those walks of life an opportunity to still serve. There's other schools like Texas A&M and I forget what the school in Virginia is called, the Citadel, but those are military schools, even though they're known for being military schools. I don't know that CU Boulder is known as a military school, so it invites people from all walks of life and still gives them the opportunity to serve. So it's a really special place, and I also take every opportunity to come back whenever I can.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for today's panelists. This concludes our panel. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today and contributing such a diverse range of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and your perspective for today's discussion. That is all. Thank you.